Okay, everyone. So now we're going to talk about the Reformation and the arts. And so at the very beginning of all my videos this week, I explained to you what the Reformation was. It's when people are breaking away from the Roman Catholic Church and forming their own churches. The first being Martin Luther, who breaks away from the church in Germany, the Roman Catholic Church in Germany, because, again, as I explained, really the main sticking point was the idea of indulgences. And so it was that and other things, and supposedly he nails these grievances on the church door, and in response the church excommunicates him. They tell him he can't be a priest anymore. So he goes on and he forms his own religion, and he has many people that follow him, and that becomes known as Lutheranism. Okay. The other big divide that you should know is Henry VIII. You should have studied that in your history class at some point in high school or junior high. And so the King of England, he wants to divorce his wife. The church says no. So he says, okay, fine, I'll just form my own church. And so he starts his own church, he divorces his wife, and he marries somebody else. Okay. So this is the time period. Look at the date, 1533. Remember, 1492 is when Columbus discovers the Americas. So we're right around that time period of colonization here. Colonization is happening on the continent of Africa and happening in the Americas. We've got the roots that have been established for quite some time coming in from Asia at this point. So the world is expanding. People are traveling more, and some people are getting really wealthy from it. So this is a painting by Hans Hobelin the Younger, and I have a video up on Blackboard you should watch because there's only so much I can do here with a still image. But these are, this is called the French ambassadors from 1533. And so we have two here, this wealthy man, and then, well, they're both really wealthy. This wealthy man who was an explorer, and then this guy who was in the church. All of the things on the table here have to do with exploration. These are, there's a globe here, there's this thing that was used to chart the stars, and other instruments that were for navigation. And then we see he is just so elaborately dressed, wealthy dressed, and so is he. We have this lute here and a Bible that is open, or a hymn book that is open, that are making references to Martin Luther and to the church. And then, of course, you're going to say, well, what on earth is this? Okay, so this is a skull in this very extreme perspective. So the only way you can see this really is to stand to the side of the painting. But when you are able to see it then in perspective, then you can't really see the rest of the painting. And that's the point that's being made here. Here are the eye sockets, the nose, and the mouth of the skull. And so he must have painted this with mirrors to figure out how to elongate the skull like this. And then up here is a crucifix kind of hidden behind the curtain. Once again, this idea of questioning the church's authority over people. And the people had really been breaking away more and more from the church and wanting things explained more on a scientific level, more on a humanistic ideas in opposition actually at points to the church. So please watch the video on this, and I'll walk you through these objects much better than I can. And this is going to bring us to the Netherlands and Spain, or the Netherlandish and Spanish art. And the most important person that we're going to pick up from Spain is Hieronymus Bosch. This is a huge painting he did called Gardens of Earthly Delight. And this is open. There are paintings on the back as well. So we have Adam and Eve in the garden here, and everything looks wonderful and beautiful, except for the fact that the cat here is carrying a dead animal. There's like something not quite right in this painting because of that. Then we have the image of the main panel, that is the Garden of Earthly Delights. So we have everybody partaking in things of delight. So, for example, people are eating sweet fruit that are as big as they are. But then they're also doing other things like sexual acts and stuff. And some really kind of weird stuff that's going on in this painting. And then it's the idea kind of like indulging too much is going to bring about the collapse of the world. Because then we have in the last panel, we have the apocalypse, the end of the world. And we have these weird creatures. We have weird creatures throughout this whole thing. But this one is probably the easiest to see. You've got this human head on it and this body that's open on the back. It's just bizarre. So, and this is the end of time, the end of destruction here of the world. And this seems like a weird kind of storyline here, but this is, again, the time when we had a lot of questioning of what people knew as far as what the church had said, what science had said, everything. You know, we get to the point where people say, okay, wait a second, the earth is not flat, it's round. You know, I mean, you have to think of that. It's pretty mind-boggling if one day you think the earth is flat and the next day you're being told, no, somebody sailed around the world and it's round. It would be pretty strange. The other thing is, this is a time where we've had a number of plagues, and Hieronymus Bosch does live through one of the plagues. So he sees death around him from that as well. And then in the northern part of Europe, in the Netherlands, we have now people have really turned away. The church is not as important. Not that people didn't go to church anymore, but it just wasn't so dominant in their lives. So they didn't want images of Jesus hanging in their house or religious pictures hanging in their house. And we have our merchant class that becomes wealthy at this time from all this trading. So they haven't been given the money. They've earned the money. So they don't want the king or anything. They don't want pictures of the king in their house. So what do artists paint? Well, they begin to look around them and paint everyday scenes, which become known as genre paintings. So here's an everyday kind of scene. It's called Return of the Hunters from 1565. So here we have in the Netherlands, in the wintertime, the land freezes with snow, or at least this happened for global warming. In 1565, this was happening. And in this area, there are a lot of canals in the cities. A lot of the area is actually very at sea level, or actually sometimes below sea level in this area. So there are lots of waterways and stuff around, canals around these, and they would freeze. And people would ice skate through the towns this way. And there's a couple of books that have been written about these people skating, probably too outdated that you wouldn't know. It's like Hans and the Silver Skates or something like that it was called, which I read as a child, but you probably did not. And so here we have the scene here of people ice skating here. We have these men who are returning from the hunt. We have workers, they're working over here and down here, more people working over here, or perhaps they're playing on the ice over here. We have the church still, but it's way in the background. It's really not as important anymore. Because of the white of the snow, we have this kind of contrast that happens between the trees and the ravens, and it's winter time, so the trees look dead, although we know they're hibernating. They look dead, so there is an element of kind of like death, or you know, what is coming next, the uncertainty of life that can be associated with this painting. But it really is more just about, you know, here's a scene of everyday life. Here's what life looked like at this time period. So this is what I'm going to paint, because you don't want to buy a painting of Jesus, and you don't want to buy a painting of the king. And we can really make a comparison between that genre painting and in the very beginning, the first piece I showed you, which I said was a transition between the Gothic and the early Renaissance, which was this painting by the Limburg brothers, right? And here we had the Gothic element of the building sliced open like a dollhouse. Here we don't have anything like that. So this is much, much more realistic, and perspective-wise too, much more realistic than what we started with in the beginning of the Renaissance. So we have some other women then that were doing self-portraits. I said we have very few women at this time period. And in Spain, we also have El Greco. And El Greco comes to Spain, and at first he's not really, his paintings aren't so liked, but eventually he is appreciated for his paintings. So here we have the death of this man here, and the mourners looking on at the funeral, and this very elaborate kind of twisting scene as the body then is brought up to heaven into Jesus in the sky. And this kind of real use of light and dark, light being so important again in this painting. Oh, one other thing I'll say about her is that, women, again, they're really not allowed to do much in the field of art, but portraiture does become, and genre paintings do become something that's accepted and something that women are allowed to do, and we'll see that more next week when we continue on.